there's a few different things that we could talk about. There are kind of three big rules. One is do no harm. And I would say that you're running afoul of that rule by presenting this as if it's easy. Because the problem is that when you present as if you can help make something simple and easy when it's still going to be hard, what you end up doing is setting the wrong expectations, and people then lose hope. They could have actually gotten the results if they had been told that it would be hard. But you told them it was going to be easy, and so then when it's not, they think something's wrong with them, they give up. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klink. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there, welcome to episode 203 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm excited for today's episode because today is the day that we're really going to start to dig into some of these ethical questions in marketing and in building an online business. Now, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, we are starting, and we started it last week, a new series here on the podcast called The Ethical Way. We're diving into kind of a fundamental question about what does it mean to be an ethical marketer in kind of the online space, but more particularly in the space where what we're selling isn't a physical product. It's something that kind of promises a result, a transformation. So this applies to coaches, course creators, membership site owners, service providers, everything else where what we are promising isn't kind of like an iPhone. Like an iPhone, it does what it says it's going to do, right? And so yes, there are ethical questions there, but I'm going to suggest that we have different ethical questions in our space because it's not like we can simply say, hey, our product does what it says. And it's a very simple question. And so that's what this episode is, or this series is about. Last week's episode was the introduction. I kind of talked about why we need to have this discussion. I talked about different standards we could apply, including the American Marketing Association kind of code of ethics, but then also just some, basic tests like, would you be ashamed if your audience, your mom, your grandma, whoever it is, knew exactly what you were doing and why you were doing it? Would that make you kind of embarrassed? And I said, if so, that might be a good statement that there's some ethical issues here. So that was last week. Now, this week, here in episode 203, we're diving into what I'm going to call, we're calling this episode Having Hard Discussions. And really what it's about is what are our obligations to tell people about other things that might be relevant to their decision, okay? And specifically, we're going to talk about, do we need to tell them certain things that might make them decide they don't want to buy our product? And that's what we're talking about. And that's why I'm calling it hard decisions, but you'll also see it's kind of a double meaning when we get to the first point we're going to talk about. So that's what we're talking about in this episode. And again, if you didn't listen to last week's episode yet, I would suggest go back and listen to episode 202 because it kind of sets the stage. And an important thing I want you to get is I'm going to be asking questions and starting a conversation. The goal of this is to start the conversation. Now, on a couple of these things, I'm going to tell you where I come out personally, like the decisions I've made. But ethics are fundamentally a personal decision, and we have to decide for ourselves. And so I can't tell you, that, hey, here's what you have to do to be ethical. Now I can point you to the American Marketing Association. I can point you to these other things, but ultimately you have to decide for yourself. So I want you to understand that's what we're doing. This isn't to make you feel bad. I'm going to tell you candidly that some of the things we're going to talk about, I may have been guilty of doing these things that I would not do now. And so it is a conversation starter. That's what we're doing. Now, before we dive in, this episode is brought to you by my free training program, Badass Online Marketing University, or BOMU. If you don't know about BOMU yet, I think you must not have been paying attention because I've been promoting it pretty hard. It is our 100% totally free training program right now. As I'm recording this, there are 5 courses inside of it: online marketing foundations, online legal foundations, online financial foundations, a badass messaging, and badass email marketing. But it's going to grow. The course catalog will grow with more and more courses. Our idea is to create a program where you can learn everything you need to learn to build your online business for free. So you don't have to pay me or anyone else just to learn this stuff. So that's our goal for BOMU. If you haven't signed up yet, head over to bobbyklink.com/BOMU. That's BOMU. bobbyklink.com/BOMU. Now, with that, I want to get into today's discussion kind of ethics. And the first thing that I want to talk about is this concept of, because again, a lot of us, well, pretty much all of us are helping people with some kind of problem that they have, some kind of, something that they want changed in their life. And what I would say is that if the issue that they were looking to solve had an easy solution, they probably would have solved it without having to pay us a dime. So with that, I want you to get that almost all of us are helping people with problems that it's going to be hard for them to solve, to kind of get through the other side. Now, in my case, where I help people with marketing stuff, look, it's going to be hard to build an online marketing business. I tell people, I joke, for example, that I want to get a hard button instead of an easy button so that people know full well that this is going to be hard, okay? But it's not just marketing. If you help people with weight loss, let's be honest, it's gonna be hard. And especially to kind of make the lifetime changes. If you're someone who's helping someone, go to like a plant-based diet for wellness reasons, again, let's not pretend that's not gonna be hard. I know there's someone in my audience who helps people with kind of ongoing sobriety. That's gonna be hard, right? So all of this stuff, we're helping people with hard problems. Now, in some of those cases, everybody knows it's going to be hard, right? So, but the question that I want to pose for this first issue is, what is our obligation in our messaging, in our marketing communication, in our advertising, in our sales process to tell people this is going to be hard? And the reason why I'm asking this question isn't purely a theoretical question. I ask this because, let's be honest, a lot of people are out there presenting these things, presenting solutions to these problems as if they have an easy button, as if they're going to say, well, we're going to solve it and it's going to be easy. Now, they might not use the word easy, but they might say, well, you just follow my step-by-step process and you'll get the results. And they tell people this, and let's be very clear about why they're doing that. The reason that we've all been trained to do that is because it's likely to increase sales. People want a magic, pill, a magic button. They don't want to have to do the work. So a lot of people, as a result, they know that. And so their marketing is addressing it. And again, some people would say, well, what I'm doing is I'm selling them what they want, but then I give them what they need. And so that would be a justification. They're like, well, people want an easy solution. They want an easy button. So that's what I've got to do. But I guess my question is, where is the line? And I'm going to be honest with you. I actually think this one is an easy answer. If you're asking me my opinion, it is unethical to present things as if it's going to be easy. Now, again, if you help people with something that really is easy, fine. But I'm going to tell you, if you help people with something that's really easy, you're probably not going to be able to help them very long because people are not going to pay a lot for that. The reason why people pay us, the reason why people are willing to pay me as a business coach is because building a business is freaking hard work. And my personal opinion is there is no gray area here. Presenting this stuff as if there's an easy button, as if I have some secret strategy that's going to solve all of their problems and make this just simple, isn't ethical. And I don't even think it's a close line, personally, because I think that's lying. And I would ask you to ask yourself that question. Are you presenting your product, your offer, your services in a way that gives people a false impression about how much work is going to be involved? And to be clear, I mean, I think we could just generally agree that lying is wrong and lying is unethical. Now, again, we could make some arguments about there are times when a white lie probably is a perfectly ethical thing to do. In fact, there are probably times you could argue that telling the truth is unethical. You could make some very strong arguments. For example, like, if you were living in an oppressive regime where telling the truth might lead to someone being killed by the government, you could make a very strong moral argument that it actually is ethical to lie and would be unethical to tell the truth. Now, there are moral philosophers who would have arguments about that. But I just want to be clear, we're not in that situation. This is a place where the reason why people are kind of shading the truth is to make more money for themselves. And I don't believe that anyone is going to argue that lying to make more money for yourself is ethical. And again, I mentioned there's the American Marketing Association Code of Ethics, and there's a few different things that we could talk about. There are kind of three big rules. One is do no harm. And I would say that you're running afoul of that rule by presenting this as if it's easy. Because the problem is that when you present as if you can help make something simple and easy when it's still going to be hard, what you end up doing is setting the wrong expectations, and people then lose hope. They could have actually gotten the results if they had been told that it would be hard. But you told them it was going to be easy, and so then when it's not, they think something's wrong with them, they give up. So you're doing harm by setting the wrong expectations. But separately, one of the values is that we are supposed to foster trust in the marketing system. Again, I believe that shading the truth in a way that is not true doesn't foster trust. So to me, it would run afoul of that. But again, we really don't have to go that deep, because the American Marketing Association, the last kind of standard is that you will comply or strive to comply with these ethical values that they set out. And one of them is honesty. And one of the bullet points under there is we offer products of value that do what we claim. I would simply suggest that if you're presenting your solution as an easy button when it's going to be hard, you are not presenting your product or your service in a way that is honest about what it will do. And your product will not function as claimed, so you're violated their ethics. But again, I don't think we have to go very deep here, but I just want you to think about this. I think if we're honest with ourselves and do kind of this introspection, we all know that we have had a tendency to overplay how much easier our products will make it for people to get a result. And if we weren't in a marketing world, if we weren't trying to make money, if we weren't so engrossed in it, and we simply looked at it from kind of our general principles and values as people, we'd say, that's wrong, we shouldn't do it. And to me, that's all I need. So again, I'm very clear with people. I can't promise you anything with my coaching. And I'm telling people it's going to be hard. Building a business is not easy. I don't try to hide that at all. But again, I'm simply going to say to you, no matter what you do, if you help people with fitness, with health, with any of these things, again, if you're asking me my opinion, I think the ethical standard requires us to disclose it's going to be hard. And so I think that's kind of the first thing. I think that's the easiest one, but candidly, it's something that a lot of people are running afoul of. And I believe that if we want to be ethical marketers, need to stop doing that. We need to look inside and say, where are we presenting it as if this is going to be simple, and what should we be doing instead? So that's the first one. Now, the next thing is a broader issue, and it kind of, I guess the question that I would ask, that I pose, that I want you to think about is, what is our obligation to tell people about the other things they'll need to get results? In other words, if they're going to implement our system, maybe it's if they're going to implement our system, is that going to require them to do other things, to buy other things, etc.? So that would be one thing. But also, if we're only helping them solve one small piece and we know there are 15 other pieces, what is our obligation to tell them about those 15 other pieces? Or in other words, I mean, this kind of comes out, we see people who talk about their product being the solution, as if all we need is their thing. And so that's kind of where this comes up. And again, it comes up very clearly in the context of, if people are going to make a big investment in your program, what is your obligation to tell them, hey, you're going to need to spend money on these other things if you really want to get success, okay? And so, for example, if my program is based on the notion that you are going to spend a lot of money on Facebook ads, what is my obligation to tell you right up front, before you purchase my thing, hey, before you buy my thing, I believe that you're going to need, and I'm going to tell you to spend X dollars on Facebook ads. I picked that as one example. But there are smaller examples, like, do we have to tell people if they're going to need certain software that will be an added expense, something that they'll have to spend every month? In the online entrepreneurship space, what is our duty to tell people, hey, you probably need to talk to a lawyer. You probably need to talk to an accountant. You probably need to do these other things as well. You can kind of see in my space, it's pretty clear. In the online marketing, I can come up with a lot of examples. But again, I would suggest that I suspect that no matter what you do, you have the same situation. If you help people with one part of fitness, but you're going to say, look, but you also probably need to join a gym and do this, that, and the other, do you have a duty to tell them that as well? Now, again, I use that as a simple example, but it could be, hey, if you help people with eating healthy, but by the way, for most people, that's going to mean spending more money on food. And again, I don't know if this is true. I'm simply positing it as an example. Should you tell people, hey, just FYI, you also are going to need to expect to spend this much more on food on a monthly basis on average? Now, what I'm going to say is that this issue to me is closer to the line. This is not one of those things where I look at it and say, well, I think there is an absolute, clear, 100% ethical answer. And part of that comes from, and again, this isn't necessarily a good answer, but what I look at and what I think about is this, that we as humans naturally look and we see there's a difference between, look, if we say, hey, I'm going to help you, I'm going to help you craft a healthy eating plan. And that's what we're saying. That's what we're talking to people. We're not telling them that's all you need. So if we're not pretending it's all they need, if we're not presenting our thing as the solution and the only solution they need, really this is a matter of omission, right? Not commission. In other words, it's by us not telling them about the other stuff. Is that a problem? Now, if someone directly asks you, hey, are you going to do I have to invest in other software to make this work? Do I have to invest in anything else? And you lie again, that's unethical because you're lying. But the question is, what if no one even asks? Or what if you aren't prominent about it, so you know that a lot of your audience doesn't know that before they buy? Now, you're not really lying, right? Because you're not affirmatively saying anything wrong. But the question I would ask you, and I think you ought to ask yourself, is do you have a duty to disclose that information even if you're not asked? And again, this is where like you could look and looking at the American Marketing Association standards, there's not like a clear answer here. I mean, there is a fairness value that includes that we're supposed to represent our products in a clear way. So you might say, well, does that mean that I have to tell them the limits? Do I have to tell them about the other things? And I'll just tell you, because ethics is not a clear answer, I don't think when you look at the American Marketing Association, at least, that there is a yes or no answer. This is a gray area that I think is up to you. But to me, when I think about this question, my personal answer candidly comes down to when I look at why is it that people are not talking about those things? What is the intent of omitting that information? And, when I look at it, what I seem to say is the main reason why you wouldn't disclose that to people is because you're afraid that if they know they're going to have to also sign up for another program, also do this, also spend money there, they might not buy your product. And if that's kind of the reason why, if that's the resistance, to me, that answers the question. Now, again, call me crazy, but I go back to my training as a lawyer, and in kind of fraud cases and all these other types of standards for law, there is this standard of materiality. And information is considered material. And again, I won't get into the legal definition, but you can't lie or omit material information if that information might have changed the decision making. Now, again, the legal standard I don't want to get into, but my view is that from the ethical standpoint, if I believe that knowing this information would affect the decision to buy or not buy for a sizable group in my audience, I believe I have a duty to disclose it. Now, again, I'm not talking about, is there one random person who wouldn't buy if they knew some information out of thousands? We can't know that because, again, that could be all kinds of things. Like, maybe somebody wouldn't have bought if they'd known that, I don't know. I mean, some random piece of information about me. But when I look at this and I say, when we don't disclose the other things they're going to need, the other money they're going to need to spend, I look at that and I say, that would be material to me as a buyer. Going in to make a purchase, I would want you to tell me, hey, you're also going to have to buy this other stuff. You're also going to have to sign up for this other thing. You're also going to have to learn this other skill. That's information that would affect or potentially affect my buying decision. And so I think it's information that should be disclosed. So that's my personal decision. And I want you to think about and ask yourself that question. Where is the line for you on this? And you've got to make a decision and you need to think about it. And so that's kind of this second piece. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is a very specific application where I see some of these concepts come into place. And it may not apply to you. It doesn't apply to me. It never has. But it's something that I wanted to raise so that people are thinking about it and seeing where you might want to ask these kinds of questions. And specifically what I'm talking about is the context of a back-end membership that comes after a course. Now, there are some situations where that back-end membership doesn't raise any kind of ethical issues at all. I mean, let's just be clear. There's some that don't. But the context I have in mind is this. If in selling your course, you say, I have an 8-week program that provides you all the information you need to do X. Okay? If that's how you're marketing your front end as a discrete period and it provides all the information, etc. But then you have a back-end membership where a big part of that membership is helping people implement and get even their first level of results for what you taught in the course. What are your obligations? Do you have a duty to tell people when they're purchasing your course very expressly, very explicitly, by the way, after the 8 weeks, I'm going to offer you the opportunity to get ongoing support with me at X price. Do you have that duty? And we can posit a couple of different situations, right? I mean, and we could think about it. And honestly, I think the ethical decision here potentially really hinges on a lot of different issues. So for example, what if you know going in that even the go-getters, even the people who are going to take action, going to go consume the information as soon as you let them, take action on it as soon as you let them, but even those people are unlikely to really even finish within 8 weeks. And I don't mean finish the course, but I mean implement. In that context, would that affect your decision about your need to disclose? And again, we could talk about that versus let's say that, you had a program where in 8 weeks, the vast majority of people, or really anybody who committed to consume the information, would get it done. Okay. And I'm not talking about the people who choose not to consume the information, who choose, not to do the work, et cetera. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you look and say, hey, realistically, even people who put in the work aren't going to get done within that period. How does that affect things versus a situation where, hey, as long as you're willing to put in the work, hey, in 8 weeks, you're done and you've got it. And then it really is ongoing maintenance, right? So you have to think about that. I think the ethical answer, the question of what is ethical, will hinge on that kind of thing. Because there may be some people who simply choose they want ongoing support, but the support is not kind of a prerequisite to get the result that you promised them. So I think that would affect the decision and affect how you should think about it. But what if it's something different? What if you know that the hardest part is what comes next? In other words, what if you know that, yes, in 8 weeks, you can get them to the finish line, but the finish line is like having something done, but you know that having it done isn't the hard work. The hard work is in tweaking, in optimizing, and doing that. So for example, if you had someone and you were saying, hey, I'm going to give you in 8 weeks, you're going to have a product designed and ready to launch, but in your head, candidly, having it ready and having it done and ready to launch is that's just the beginning, because the hard work is in the launching and getting it out there and the marketing and the selling and all that, right? So if that's the situation, how would that affect what you think about this? And again, I don't know the answer to this one, but I think we need to be thinking about it. And again, like I said, I personally don't have this as a model in my business. I never have. I never had a back-end membership. I never had a continuation. I never had any of that stuff. So I never had to think about this for my own business. But when I think about how from an ethical standpoint, from the ethical standards, I think about things like transparency and honesty, which the AMA says we're supposed to do. And I think we have to think about, what does it mean to be transparent? What does it mean to be honest in this context? And that's why I say it's going to depend on a lot of factors. But ultimately, I think, we can kind of ask a couple of different questions that will help us answer this issue. Number one, would you want to know if you were a buyer? Is it information that you would want to know if you were on the other side? If so, I believe you should disclose it. So if your situation, you look at all the facts and say, hey, if I was facing this decision, I would want to know this. I would want to know that, hey, most people aren't going to get done, or hey, this isn't going to happen, and you're going to offer me this thing to help me implement. And, if I really want to get the results, most likely I will have to take you up on it. Again, you can see how you could do this and think through, would you want to know? And if at the end of the day you say, yeah, I'd want to know that, then the answer is you should disclose it. And if you say, no, it's not a big deal. I mean, it's just an add-on that some people are going to take me up on. They don't need it. They really don't need it. And most people will get results without this thing on the back end, but they might want to because they like me. Hey, in that case, maybe your conclusion is not a big deal. I wouldn't care, so I don't feel the need to disclose it. But again, so that's the first question. Would you want to know if you were the buyer? The second question comes back to where I came down on the second issue we talked about, talking about the other things they're going to need. Is your reluctance to disclose it because you're worried that will make people not buy? If that's why you, as the seller, are reluctant to disclose the information, I would suggest to you that that's a sign that you're putting your interests above theirs, and it's probably information that is material that they would want to know, and that's why you don't want to tell them. And that, in my view, would make it material. If I were in your situation, I would say that would mean if I want to be ethical, need to disclose this information in the sales process of the front end. And I want to be clear, although I talked about this in the context of, course that leads to membership, this kind of discussion also applies to things like self-liquidating offers. For example, I signed up for one that was Google Sheets that, were supposed to help me track stuff. And again, I'm a pretty smart guy. I know a lot about marketing, but they present us, hey, $37. And then there's an upsell that says, after I'd purchased the $37, it says, hey, do you want the videos that explain blah, blah, blah? And I think that was another $137 or something. And I was like, no, I don't need videos to explain this. But then literally I get in and cannot make heads or tails out of this Google Sheet and what the heck I'm supposed to do. Now, in my view, there's really no question. If you have that kind of thing for an SLO that's a tool, and then there's like an instruction or a course that goes with it, and people really need those instructions, you got an ethical duty to tell them that up front and not present it as if it's two different offers. Because you're doing that to hook them, to make them pay $37, because you're basically misrepresenting the total cost here. So again, I just wanted to make that clear so that you didn't think that this whole discussion was about back-end memberships. It's not. It's about any time that you have a stacked thing where you get them, you have one thing that's the lead in and then a back end behind it. You need to ask yourself this question: what are my obligations to tell people about that? And again, this is something that I want you to be thinking about. Now, it might be that in your business, this just doesn't apply. You don't do this, so you don't have to think about it. And it's so great. But if you do, I want you to ask yourself, what is the ethical thing to do and how should I present it? And so that's my call to action today. If you have any of this in your business. So again, what is your obligation to tell people how hard it's going to be, that it's not going to be easy? What is your obligation to tell them about other things they're going to need, whether it's things they're going to have to pay for, things they're going to have to do, etc. And then if you have a follow-up program, what's your obligation to tell them about that? I believe you ought to be thinking about all those things, and you need to come up with what is your ethical standard and decide what you should be doing. So that's today's episode. And what I would love for you to do, after you've listened to this, I would love to hear from you. What are you thinking? How does this strike you? You can find me on social. You can go to the Facebook group, Badass Online Marketers, but you can also just tag me on Facebook. I'm Bobby Klink. You can tag me on Instagram. I'm Bobby Klink. You can do all that. I want to have a discussion. I'd love to know what you think about this, what you're thinking when you hear this. Is this making you think about things that maybe you're doing in your business and saying, wow, maybe I should think about whether I should be doing that or not? But I'd love to hear, because I want this to be a conversation. So that's it for this episode. Now, next week, we're going to be taking on another important concept. We're going to be talking about taking responsibility for the decisions we make, because this is actually one of the American Marketing Association's standards, is that we are supposed to take responsibility for our own marketing decisions and actions. And I want to talk about what does that mean in the online space, because I think there's a few places it comes up and we need to talk about it. Now, we're going to have that discussion next week. I'm looking forward to it. But in the meantime, enjoy your week and go out and build the business of your dreams. I'll talk to you later. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams.